Hello people, today's topic is, what is your favorite band? Do you even need to know, and if you do, how you measure it? Or do you just go by intuition? I know it's not really a relevant question for a lot of you people out there. Either you don't simply care or you have it figured out by intuition. Maybe you have certain childhood or teenage years albums that by very definition give you the answer. This is my favorite bands because I grew up with it. There's nothing wrong with that, mind you, but I'll explain what I mean here. Sometimes we don't know the answer. Sometimes that's not even relevant. But for me, I always get those questions. Not always, like every day, but often questions asking like, Rauta, what is your favorite band and why do you like this and that? And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. The answer might depend on day to day and all that stuff. And because I'm a very, very numerical person, I mean, I've been reviewing albums for over 20 years, closer to 25 or so, means that I've decided, to go with the numbers. I mean, I've kind of grown into that stuff most of my life, reviewing albums, giving out scores for thousands and thousands of albums. And not only albums, I tend to review movies, TV series, video games, etc. So even books. So when I watch a movie, for instance, I just go and rate it on IMDb, Internet Movie Database. If I, play video game, I do the same. Even with books, sometimes I do that stuff, even though I don't really use a site for that matter. But sometimes when I write, metal book reviews or whatever. And of course, with the albums, I tend to write a lot of them, and as such, I rate them. Most of you, I guess, or many of you at least, know my list, Google sheet, where I have listed all the interviews I've done and most of my reviews. It's still missing thousands of reviews because, it takes so much time to, fill the blanks, but still, nonetheless, I do it. I also add scores to rateyourmusic.com or RYM because I just like numbers. Numbers don't really lie. They are what they are. And as such, I've decided to, figure out how to define your favorite bands by numbers. The numerical system, which I called Rauta Rating. Yeah, I know, it sounds kind of silly that I decided to name it by me, but it makes a little bit more sense than just go numbers by Jerry or whatever. So let's call it Rauta Rating for the simplicity, and there's nothing else to it. So how do you figure out then, by numbers that is, what is a really good band, what is your favorite band, etc. Now, for me, it's the albums that matter. And for that reason, I've decided to figure out my favorite bands by numbers, based on albums they have done. And mind you, only the good albums count. It doesn't matter if there's a band you like one album, but they have like 20 bad albums or mediocrity, because who cares? Mediocrity or bad albums don't really mean anything when we're talking about your favorite bands. For instance, I'm a big Metallica fan to a certain degree. The early years, they're really great albums. I'm talking about the essential 4, sometimes 5 first albums. Anything after that, I'm not really a fan. It's not like I dislike them or hate them, but they are not meaningful to me in the sense that I would say I love them. And as such, they are not in my record collection, which is not that big. Sometimes people also ask about that. So what does matter then? Well, obviously, the good albums. But even with that, I would say the real great ones matter way more than single good ones. Say there is a band which has 5 good albums. Like, yeah, I really like them, but I don't really love them. Obviously, they're not that important as the bands which might have 1 or 2 perfect albums. Whatever perfect means that is. Some people say there is no perfect album as such. I've decided to just call that fantasy element utter bullshit. It doesn't matter. There are no perfect albums, but there are albums that we could call masterpieces, bullseyes, whatever. The ones that are 10 out of 10. I tend to prefer the rating system for 1 to 10, where about 5 or 6 is mediocrity. A little bit more on that positive or negative side, and that's pretty much of it. If you really want to go super mathematical with it, you could say 5.5 is the absolute mediocrity, and 1 is the least score. 0 isn't the score, so it's more like the review score not available. So my scoring starts with 1 and ends with 10, 10 being the absolute best masterpieces, bullseyes, or whatever, and 1 being the worst. Now, I don't know if I ever actually rated an album 1 out of 10. I think my lowest scores were something like 1.5, which means I'm a faulty human being. I failed to use the full scale, but I'm pretty damn close to it. I think there are as many 10s roughly as there are like 2s, but I should really have 1s used. So, like I said, I'm a little bit more in the biased side of things, meaning I give more positive scores than negative ones. That being said, however, I have the reputation in Finland, that is goes way before Rauta times, that I'm the kind of negative reviewer. I gave way too many 6s and 7s instead of 8s and 9s. What really it means, 7 is already on the positive side of things, meaning like quite good, but not exactly real good. So there is that. But people see those scores sometimes negative because, there are even corporations that don't count anything beyond, that is lower than 7 worth mentioning, meaning 7 is the first positive score and anything lower than that doesn't mean a thing. And in Finland, we have the school system where the ratings go from 4 to 10, 4 being failure and 10 being the maximum score which you can get. So the highest rating, meaning 7 is the mediocrity. And as such, when I'm rating albums from 1 to 10, 7 tends to sound like mediocrity, even though it's the better side of things. What I'm explaining is this, that I want to emphasize the meaning of numbers and what they really mean and how we figure out by those numbers. So for Rauta rating, anything lower than 8 doesn't count. Why? Because they are not that good. For example, I don't put albums in my collection if they are lower than 8. Or with the certain exceptions, being gifts for friends and all that stuff, but they don't really go as collecting albums, if you know what I mean. So for me, 8 is the starting point, and anything less than a 9 is considered an 8 for terms of Rauta rating. Anything less than 10, say 9.5, counts as 9 for Rauta rating. And now we get to the actual numbers. 8 means 1. You get 1 point for an album worth an 8, right? So if you have a band that has like 3 good albums, let's call them 8 out of 10 ones, yes, the band is worth 3 points. Not too much, right? Okay, so 9 out of 10. Or better, but not 10, is 3 points. Why 3 points versus 1? Because in my opinion, a 9er is way better than an 8er, meaning than a 9-point album. If I had to choose one band with a 9-point album, or 8 out of 10 albums, I'm like, okay, I get this one album because it's so much better. So there's a huge gap, in my opinion, from 8 to 10, 9, much as there is a big jump from 7 to 8, from 6 to 7, and so forth. And for 10, I would give 5 points. So the system is pretty fucking simple. You give 1 point for albums 8 out of 10, 3 if it's 9 out of 10, and 5 if it's 10 out of 10. Really fucking simple. And now let's do some counting, and I'll give you a couple of examples of my favorite bands. Now, I didn't cheat prior to this video, and nor should you. I mean, this is not, making your favorite band by intuition, that is, making it forcefully to be the best. Go with the numbers, and maybe you will learn that you actually like certain other band more than the one that you think is your favorite. For example, I have a few bands in my mind which I think are roughly among the best ones. But I don't know if that's backed by numbers. So for this sake of giving you an example, I'll use a couple of bands which I know are among my favorites, but I don't know if they are the absolute favorites. I think the other one actually is, but let's see about that. This is just an example. You obviously, if you have free time and want to figure it out, you take the list of your albums and figure out by these numbers and go for the respective Rauta rating. And of course, we can talk about that on Rauta's Discord. Or if you're lazy or don't like Discord, you can just put your comments in the comments box below. Alright, let's do it before this video gets super lengthy. So I picked a couple of my candidates here, for the lack of better words, the contenders for best Rauta rating things. I'll start with Death, alphabetical order and all. Now, Death only made 7 albums, which is not too much, but considering they're all good or better in my opinion, this is a very, very good example. I could have, included, say, bands like Darkthrone here, but going to more like 16 albums and figuring out what are the actual ones, yeah, too much time wasted. But Death is the band, I have all the albums, so it's pretty good candidate, right? So let's think about the scores. Scream Bloody Gore and Leprosy are, in my opinion, one of the best death metal albums ever, and Death is my favorite death metal band, at least before figuring out through Rauta Rating. So how would I rate these albums? Well, to me they're closer to 10, but they are not 10s. They're 9.5 roughly albums. They're missing a little bit something, so really, really super fucking great albums, but not 10s. So I would give these, based on the Niner scores, 3 points each. Spiritual Healing and Human are not as good as Scream Bloody Gore or Leprosy in my opinion, but they count as 9ers, so they're like the 9 out of 10s if these are 9.5. So once again, 3 points each, right? Very, very fucking simple. So you have like 3 plus 3, 6 plus 3, 9 plus 3, 12, right? Very simple. Individual thought patterns never resonated with me that much, and same goes for the Sound of Perseverance. They are barely, but they are 8 out of 10s. So 1 point each. So if these are 12, 13, 14. Pretty nice score if I think so. Symbolic, then again, happens to be the best death metal album of all times. At least one of them, very, very fucking few. It's the 10 out of 10 albums. A real grower. It took me more than 20 years. I don't lie. It became this much a great album. When I heard it back in 1995, I figured out this sounds pretty good. I didn't get it right away. It just kind of became a grower, through the earlier Death albums, which I had already, fell in love with. So Symbolic, became this really, really great album. This is something that I went through in my Death discography video, so I'm not going to recap it here. My point here is, it wasn't 10 to begin with. The albums don't tend to be like that for me anyway. It takes time. So eventually it became these 10 out of 10 albums, worth 9 points. So remember, 12 points for the early 4, and 1 and 2 for these two, so basically 14 points. 19. In my opinion, that is something that I could compare to a lot of bands. If I now open Burzum or Darkthrone tab, I guess they would get pretty high scores, but like I said, I'm not gonna use this time and waste your time, more importantly, to figure it out. But 19 is a very, very good score to start comparing the other bands, at least from my perspective. If you are a big, say, Horna fan and you like all of their albums, maybe the number will be higher than that. It doesn't matter. This is not about competing my taste versus yours. It's yours only, and you get to, rate however you want your favorite bands. Now let's talk about one of my other favorites, Slayer, which in my opinion, by gut feeling, by intuition, is the best band of all times. Yeah, I know it's surprising to a lot of people who think I only listen to black metal or black and death metal. But thrash metal is my secret love. Not so secret. And everybody who has known me for a lot of years know that I do love Slayer a lot. But this is not as simple and straightforward as with Death, because I don't have all the Slayer albums in my shelf, in my collection that is. Why? I don't think that Slayer is that consistent as Death. For example, I've never been a big Show No Mercy fan. I know it's shocking, but it's just too much, the new wave of British heavy metal influenced on the albums. I'm a bigger fan of Live Undead, but that doesn't count as an album, studio album anyway. So it's out of this list, and basically it's recycling the same songs, so it would be kind of unfair to include it. So I give Show No Mercy less than an 8, so 0 points for that. How about Hell Awaits then? It's closer to a 9er, but it's 8.5 for me. 1 point. Rainy Blood, then again, the best album ever, I think. Well, at least one of them. 5 points. So here we are, around 6. What about Side of Heaven? Well, it's a 9er, definitely. Seasons in the Abyss is almost a 10 out of 10 album. Remember what I said about Death's two first albums. Seasons in the Abyss is the 9.5. So in my opinion, the second best Slayer album. But still, not the 10 out of 10 albums, meaning it's only 3 points. Divine Intervention is great, but it's hard, challenging, not really easy to approach Slayer album, like the least easiest Slayer album to approach. But I love it. I like it a lot, not as much as some of the previous albums. So 8.5 for that. 1 point only. Undisputed Attitude is a cover album of punk songs. Never resonated me with that much. It's nice to listen to it once in 10 years. But it's not an 8 for me, so 0 points for that. However, Diabolical Musica, one of the most hated or at least disliked Slayer albums. However, I like it for 8 points. Yeah, I know it's weird, but I do. So 1 point for that. And here on at least Metal Archives, the least rated Slayer album, God Hates Us All, which I think is a lot better than Diabolical Musica, 46% on average, is an 8 out of 10 album for me. So 1 point for that. Christ Illusion, however, is a lot better, and it's a 9er. Yeah, I know it's weird, but I like it. Well, Pain or Blood, same thing. Really strong album in my opinion. So another 9er here as well. Repentless, barely an 8. Well, I'm still thinking about it, but so far, a couple of years ago when I went through Slayer and made the video about, the kind of a Slayer ranking video, I decided to keep it as an 8. So here it is, 1 point. Yes, I know it sounds weird that I'm not including Show No Mercy here because a lot of people think it's the best. But I think those people who like it's the best is like they like heavy metal more than thrash metal because it's the least thrash album and all with Diabolical Musica, than any of the other Slayer albums. It's just too heavy metal for me. With the high pitched screams. Okay, let's not go into World of Slayer more than that. I'm just giving the points out here and making my excuses how I like certain albums. That's it. So 1 point for this. Okay, 3 points for that. 4. Another 3 points for this. 7. 1 point. 8. 1.9. Skip. 10. 13, 16, 21, 22. 22. Now, obviously, they have a lot more albums than Death, almost twice the amount. So, comparing that to their 19 with this one means this is on average a lot better. Yeah, both have only one 10 out of 10 album. Both have a couple of albums, well, more than couple albums which are 9 or better. So, on average, Death seems better, but it's the overall count that, counts. So for Rauta Rating, I think Slayer is unbeatable. But I really have to do the counting for bands like Bull Thrower, which in my opinion don't have a 10 out of 10 album, so not likely they're going to beat Slayer in the game. And Darkthrone, which have actually 2 10 out of 10 albums, but then again a lot of rubbish as well. So I don't know, it's gonna be interesting if I do the math for Darkthrone. Maybe I will eventually do it, maybe I will include it here. Or maybe it doesn't really matter. But in case you're wondering, if you're gonna ask me, I'm kind of bound to do the math. I'm bound to do the counting and give the Rauta rating here. So in case you're wondering how to do it in a numerical, mathematical way, just do these counts. So remember, 1 point for 8s, 3 points for 9ers, and 5 points for 10s. Now, this is a way for you to figure out which is your favorite band. It might surprise you, or you might already know it by gut feeling. Now, have fun with it, or don't waste your time on it. It's totally up to you. But still, looking forward to hear what are your favorite bands based on this system, not gut feeling. If you don't have the time, or will, or energy to do it, then don't reply. Give me the answers that are based on this system if you feel like doing that. I'm very, very interested in hearing your opinion. What is your favorite bands by the very system? So, have fun with it and don't take it too seriously. And more importantly, be honest with yourself. Don't give your, I'm assuming this is my favorite band, album 10s just because you want that to win. It just makes no sense to use this system when you're, fucking with it, when you're not being honest. But now, off you go and give me your answers when you have time. We can discuss it later.